Well, Fignon's time has got to be better than 27:47 to win the first prize in the Tour de France. Greg LeMond's effort is over. He is absolutely shattered here on the finishing line, and my goodness me, well he might be. Greg LeMond has done the performance of his life. These two men have been Siamese twins throughout the race. Now the cord is broken and it looks like Greg LeMond might, but look at the finish by Fignon. They're all turned off. It's going to be close. 27:47 he must do. The clock is counting down, so are the meters to the line. This is going to be incredible. Fignon is bouncing off the barriers here. He's lost the Tour de France. The crowd has realised it. Laurent Fignon has lost the Tour de France. Right on the line as he comes over. 55 seconds is countdown. He has lost the Tour de France by 8 seconds. Can you believe that? Laurent Fignon has lost the Tour and Greg LeMond has won it. Greg LeMond has won it.
Consider the remarkable story of Greg LeMond. As a child, he was as ordinary an American boy as you could ever hope to meet. Then one summer, Greg LeMond discovered the bicycle, and from that moment on, he was destined to be ordinary no more. God had given Bob and Bertha LeMond's only son a talent so exceptional, no one dared imagine where he could take it. Might he win the Tour de France one day? The notion seemed absurd to American cyclists long intimidated by the Europeans. But LeMond was always less interested in learning about history than in making it. And history indeed was made when in 1983, a young LeMond triumphed in the World Professional Cycling Championship. He stunned a disbelieving cycling establishment accustomed to seeing the stars and stripes at the back of the pack. Of course, no real-life fairy tale is really anything like a fairy tale, and Greg LeMond paid dearly for all his monumental success and celebrity. There was his Tour de France win in 1986, which came after a bitter feud with teammate Bernard Hinault. Disenchanted and forlorn, LeMond seemed as unhappy as if he had lost the French race. But the bitterest tragedy of LeMond's life came in April 1987, when he was accidentally shot while turkey hunting. This man so magnificent, so gifted, was now broken, helpless, struggling to hold on to life. But then again, maybe Greg LeMond's life really is a fairy tale. After all, what good story doesn't have a little poignant tragedy? When Greg LeMond beat Laurent Fignon by 8 seconds, he not only won the most exciting Tour de France in history, he also capped the most remarkable comeback in cycling, perhaps in any sport. Now, Greg LeMond leads a contingent of 12 American cyclists to the 1989 World Cycling Championship. For LeMond, it is a sentimental homecoming of sorts, for it is in this race in 1983 that he put his name into the exclusive ring of men who are called Super Champions. The love affair between Greg LeMond and the World Cycling Championship dates back to LeMond's beginnings. At the age of 15, he wrote in his personal diary that the two races he most wanted to win were the Tour de France and the World Cycling Championship. And so, can Greg LeMond become only the 5th man in history to win both the Tour de France and the World Championship in the same year? The answer today, as 190 professional cyclists ride the difficult circuit in Chambéry, France, to contest the Rainbow Jersey. Here, as ESPN brings you the World Cycling Championships. This is Chambéry, a city in the heart of the French Alps, a stage upon which the Tour de France is often decided. Today the setting is much the same, but the featured attraction is entirely different. Hello everyone, I'm Brian Drever, and welcome to the 1989 World Cycling Championships. In most sports, the symbol of victory is a cup or a trophy, but in cycling the most coveted prize is simply a piece of cloth. The most famous is the yellow jersey worn by the leader of the Tour de France. But cycling's other most coveted prize is the rainbow jersey that will be awarded here today, and the winner will wear it proudly for an entire year. That rainbow jersey has been worn by Italian Maurizio Fandriest for the past year. Today he wears the sky blue of the Italian national team. He is here not by virtue of his results, but only because he is the defending champion. Injured most of this year, he's not expected to be a contender. This year, cycling's title race comes to Chambéry, France, a city nestled in a valley of the French Alps. It is the capital of French Savoie and about 30 miles from Albertville, the nerve center of the 1992 Winter Olympics. The hills that encircle Chambéry promise to make for the most challenging circuit in the World Championship since 1980, when the race was in Sallanches, no more than 30 miles down the road. The circuit is 7.7 miles long, and the riders will do 21 laps. The total distance is 163 miles. But the greatest challenge will come from the Côte de Montagnol climb, 7.25% for 2.5 miles. Bike racing is big time in Europe, and all the stars are household names, celebrities who must constantly dodge paparazzi and autograph seekers. Not surprisingly, the hottest autograph belongs to the stars of the French national team. The biggest race is the Tour de France, and many of the sports stars have historically been Frenchmen. But France's top rider, Laurent Fignon, is also reclusive and temperamental. The other top Frenchman, Charlie Motet, is warmer, but also not as talented. By a strange twist of fate, it is Bernard Hinault who is coaching the French team, and a relaxed smile surely conceals the pressure he must feel. For both Hinault and Fignon, this race, on French soil, is a last chance for revenge at Greg LeMond's expense. For LeMond is now public enemy number one to both these men. Well, public enemy number one certainly plays the role, doesn't he? New York plates, massive Mercedes-Benz. Ironically, though, LeMond is far more popular in France than Hinault in the past or Fignon today. The French are moved, of course, by LeMond's comeback, but they also like his warmth, his accessibility. Of all the teams present in Chambéry, certainly it is the Italians who take this World Championship closest to heart. This year, their greatest hope is Gianni Bugno. The small Irish team is led by Sean Kelly, a great champion who is still looking for his first world title at age 33. Next door to Kelly's somber cabin are the bright orange jerseys of the Dutch team, led by Steven Rooks, who finished second in last year's Tour de France. And for the first time in a professional championship, the mellifluous sound of Russian is heard. This inaugural Soviet professional team is an unknown quantity. Isolated at the end of the row of cabins is Team USA, and the first to arrive is Andy Hampsten of Boulder, who won the Tour of Italy in 1988. In LeMond's absence, Hampsten would clearly be the top American rider, but with LeMond here and fit, Hampsten, naturally reserved, seems to have faded into the woodwork a bit. Not long ago, the Americans would come to the World Championship with 2 or 3 riders. Today, they are many and talented. As LeMond makes his entrance, the crowd shouts his name and the press corps swarm around him. But out of sight and out of reach of the crowd, Andy Hampsten contemplates the peculiar effort of the World Championship. LeMond's, always the innovator, has decided to ride a new carbon fiber bike today. This is the kind of risk most cyclists would be unlikely to take in such an important race, but taking risks is what has made LeMond's exceptional. He has inspired Europeans for nearly a decade, and now his story has moved Americans as well. When we return, a look at LeMond's phenomenal career.
La Route Départementale 520 rises out of the valley of Grenoble to the Col de la Placette. It's quite an ordinary French secondary road, except that today the winner of the Tour de France is training on it. And that, of course, is American Greg LeMond, author of The Miraculous Comeback. He's also, remarkably, the new great sports hero of France. They say the French are a chauvinistic lot, and a strong argument could be made for that claim. But although LeMond beat a Frenchman to win the Tour, his story so transcends the trivialities of nationalism that he's revered as if he were himself French. And what an unlikely turn of fortune. And you know, before that, Greg LeMond was always seen as the winner of the 1986 Tour de France and the American who stole it from the Frenchman Bernard Hinault. Cycling here in Europe has gone on for more than 100 years. In fact, it started before the auto came along. And it's fair to say that the Victorian attitude has remained for a long time. Greg LeMond came with an American attitude. He came here purely to win money from professional bike riding. And that was something the European could not understand. He also came along liking to drive fast cars and playing golf in the middle of the cycling season. And above all, he liked eating ice cream. And this was hardly the attitude of a top professional athlete. Then came the injury when Greg LeMond was shot, and after that the long fight back when he showed the courage of a top cyclist. After that, his popularity increased enormously. Then came the Tour de France in July 1989, and Greg LeMond beating Laurent Fignon by just 8 seconds. You would have expected a Frenchman on his hometown of Paris would get all the cheers. Instead, Laurent Fignon was booed into second place, and the cheers were reserved for Greg LeMond, and they could have been heard all across Europe.
Well, welcome back, and what a day. I hope you haven't just joined us, but just in case, let me tell you that Greg LeMond has turned the Tour de France upside down today. He has won it by just 8 seconds.
Bonsoir, la grande boucle est bouclée, 3220 km et des poussières avalées, et le sacre final tout à l'heure sur les Champs-Élysées, mais pour l'Américain Greg LeMond.
No one thought he could make up 50 seconds in just 17 miles. But that's why they have the race, to find out. The world found out today, and Greg LeMond, whose career was almost ended by a hunting accident in '87 and stalled by an appendectomy and a knee injury a year ago, did the impossible.
The story of Greg LeMond must begin at the end, when a battered Laurent Fignon finished the 1989 Tour de France, and Greg LeMond had suddenly accomplished something very exceptional indeed. In the beginning, there was little to suggest that the LeMond boy would be exceptional in any way. But under that typical all-American veneer, there lurked an athlete of such dimension and talent. At a time when Americans were grateful to finish international competition and winning was entirely out of the question, LeMond nonchalantly made history by winning 3 medals at the 1979 Junior World Championships, a record which still stands today. Such was the meteoric rise of Greg LeMond. LeMond became the hottest professional recruit of 1981, and racing with the pros was a dream come true. But when later success was not as forthcoming as he'd hoped, LeMond felt isolated in a Europe of strange custom and remarkably hostile press. Then in 1983, he realized one of his 2 lifelong ambitions. After a sleepless night and a bad case of nerves, he hit the big time with a resounding solo victory in the World Championship. With the rainbow jersey draped over his shoulders for a year, LeMond was no longer a prospect. He was a champion and a marked man. To the casual observer, it seemed a fairy tale, but on closer inspection, it was anything but. There was his first Tour de France, a disappointment because he didn't win. And in his second tour, he sacrificed his chance for teammate Bernard Hinault. This marked the start of a dark period for LeMond. Oh sure, he took the silver medal in the 1985 World Championship, but LeMond had seen now an ugly side of cycling. He felt bitter, at war with his team, at war with his sport, and perhaps even at war with himself. The lowest point was paradoxically the highest point. When Greg LeMond won the Tour de France in 1986, he felt so stretched and abused that he could scarcely enjoy winning the most coveted prize in cycling. LeMond won the race, but the war with Bernard Hinault and his team, La Vie Claire, had reached fever pitch. If LeMond had felt isolated before, he was now truly alone. In America, though, the situation was entirely different. LeMond was the obvious golden boy of an invigorated sport. He appeared on morning news shows, made popular appearances, and wrote a book. But just when it seemed Greg LeMond might be turning a corner in April 1987, his world came crashing down in a flurry of gunshot. Out turkey hunting, he was accidentally shot in the abdomen by his brother-in-law, Pat Blades. And so one of the greatest athletes alive fell in a heap, riddled with buckshot. It was as if a great concert pianist had broken both hands. There seemed to be no end to the calamities LeMond suffered. While on the road to recovery, he was felled with appendicitis. Then later, it was tendinitis. Yet all this trouble had a strangely healing effect. He moved away from sunny California to Minnesota, where he was more comfortable with the decency of Midwestern manners. Of course, we all know this story has a happy ending. And it's ironic how tragedy has a way of reinforcing life's happier moments. Greg LeMond doesn't hide the fact that without the hunting accident, his recent success wouldn't be nearly as poignant. Now, Greg LeMond has become what's known as a hot property. Warner Brothers will make a movie on his story, and he stands to become the first cyclist ever to make $1 million a year. The cynical observer might say that it's no surprise that America's blue-eyed boy now seems so content and at ease. After all, success does have that effect. But that would be misunderstanding Greg LeMond, because unlike the yuppies of his generation, LeMond is not interested in power-mongering or collecting zeros in his bank account. LeMond's greatest motivation for success, quite simply, is family. Greg's been married to Kathy for 9 years, and they already have 2 sons with a 3rd child expected soon. But whatever his personal motivations, fame and fortune keep coming LeMond's way. Even so, LeMond still lucidly recalls that, until recently, things were completely different.
There were times where I was getting dropped and I couldn't stay with people that normally I could keep up with when I was in good shape with one leg. So, you know, I had some really hard points in the last 2 years, and it's weird sometimes. I'd have a little result, and my attitude would change, and as soon as I felt good, a month later down the road, I felt I had made no progress. The most difficult Tour de France for me was 1986 in terms of the mental stress and that. This year was relatively easy because any result I had, I was happy with. When I won the first time on the Tour de France, I was overjoyed. I mean, I would have been satisfied right there. That would have been the only thing I did in the whole Tour de France. I would have been satisfied. And things just kept getting better, better.
Of course, the Greg LeMond story hasn't simply ended with the Tour de France. If nothing else, the American wants to continue to win and prove that his victory in the French race wasn't merely a fluke. Now it's the World Championship upon which LeMond has set his sights. And as always, it is a race he is motivated to win. With the Worlds in Chambéry, this is a good opportunity to drop into the Phi Long Vietnamese restaurant, the closest thing the region has to offer to a good Chinese restaurant like the kind LeMond knows in Minneapolis. Even in his earlier heyday, it was always said of LeMond that he could win the big race, but he could never win as many races as the great European champions of old. But feasting over a plate of salade ségonaise and prawns in Vietnamese sweet and sour sauce, LeMond is clearly a changed man. And as the curious look on, it now remains to be seen if LeMond can continue to impress.
Not necessarily impressed is Laurent Fignon, LeMond's fiercest rival. With the race on French soil, Fignon must try at all costs to win the race, or at least to keep LeMond from humiliating him once again, as he did in the Tour de France. 190 racers get set for this 163-mile race. The course, the most difficult in years, is sure to separate the true champions from all the rest. The World Championships is a unique race in professional cycling. The competitors shed their sponsors' jerseys for a day and race under their respective national colors. But that allegiance is nominal. It's really every man for himself out there, and the strongest is sure to win. With the race underway, American Alexei Greywall leads the pack, and most of the riders in that pack know that the real race is yet to come. It's still early. But with 13 laps to go, Denmark's Kim Andersen makes the first bid to escape. He is joined by Colombia's Rosancio Gonzalez, Peter de Klerk of Belgium, and Martin Ducrot of Holland. The pack behind, however, is unconcerned. These early breakaways are not given much hope. Tell that to the riders who are out there, however. Their hope is to win the World Championship. The local favorite is Terry Clavriola, and he's in this breakaway having his best day ever. A man not having a very good day is Bob Roll, a last-minute substitute on the 12-man American team. He's not the least bit serious. Surprising Soviet rider Dimitri Konyshev is now in the breakaway, lending his considerable power to the group started by Denmark's Andersen. But back in the cars is Greg LeMond, answering nature's call and seemingly unconcerned about chasing back into the fast-moving field. LeMond's experience tells him that early in the race he'll have no trouble getting back in, and he has the American team to make sure that happens. 9 riders in a breakaway with 9 laps to go, and the extra power has gained them nearly 5 minutes lead. Clavriola, Andersen, and the rest have lots of company. In the pack, Laurent Fignon concerned more about lunch than chasing his teammate. The break of 9 is now 4. Thomas Wegmuller of Switzerland, Martin Ducrot of Holland, Konyshev, and Clavriola. A torrential alpine downpour throws a new wrinkle into this World Championship, one that the riders would just as well do without. Dimitri Konyshev, 23-year-old first-year professional, but many years of experience. The breakaway of 4 riders with just over 6 laps to go, and their lead is down to 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Is it true that this group of no-hopers has no hope? Terry Clavriola, for one, refuses to believe it. Back in the pack, Greg LeMond and the rest of the field begin to close the gap. And so we may be witnessing a typical pattern in professional racing, the early men working their hearts out and getting no glory. And so with 5 laps to go, the time is now for Greg LeMond and the other big stars to go to work.
So with 39 miles left in the World Championship in Chambéry, France, these 4 riders were all that remained of the original 9 who broke away with 13 laps of the circuit remaining. The rain was torrential and the main field was trying to chase them down. Eventually the attacks began to come and the Frenchman Thierry Clavriola was pouring on the power at the front, and alongside him Martin Ducrot, number 152. This time they were heading up to the top of the Côte de Montagnole together, and Thierry Clavriola was preparing to go clear, while a little bit further down the slopes it was Konyshev who was trying to catch up. The Russian rider was proving to be the big surprise of this World Championship. Further down the slopes it was Perico Delgado, who finished 3rd in this year's Tour de France, who was trying to make up lost ground. But ahead it was time for food for Thierry Clavriola, content with the gain so far, and there was still a long way to go. Perhaps the main field knew it, because the chase was not yet in full flight. Clavriola, who abandoned the Tour de France this year on the road to Poitiers with a broken hand, was now hoping to take revenge. After all, he trained for this ever since he came out of the Tour de France. He was a man in a hurry. Martin Ducrot behind was trying to keep up with him. So too was the Russian rider, Konyshev. The time gap now was coming down. It was a shade over 2.5 minutes. The big field was beginning to hunt the leaders. For the moment, the rain had stopped, and the breakaway were taking on food for the 40 miles or so that still laid ahead. And while Tilly Cavarola took on food, Thomas Wegmuller launches an attack. They say the best time to launch an attack is when the other riders are busy doing something else. Martin Ducrot chases him down, and so too does Cavarola. He's been in the lead now for almost 60 miles. This wasn't the time to give up the hunt yet, even though the field behind was showing the interest now in the lead of the race. All of the Spanish team on the front, and looking over their shoulders, they wanted the Italians and the Russians to come through as well. There'd be no help from the Russian riders, not as long as Konyshev was in the lead, number 227. Thierry Cavarola isn't the leader of the French team, but he has been given his head. The French team now should be trying to slow the chase down. Rumour was they weren't. The four leaders were coming back together. Thomas Wegmuller, who had not been climbing well all day, was being caught first by Cavarola, then Konyshev, and then Ducrot. They now face 3 more climbs, and that's all of the Côte de Montagnole. This massive crowd, their enthusiasm, not dampened by the heavy rain, was still hoping that Cavarola could pull off what seemed impossible. An early escaper, he still held a lead, but the field behind now were beginning to chase very hard. The lead was coming down very, very quickly. Already in this race, 120 riders had abandoned the event. Now Ducrot was in trouble. He soon would be out. So we're left with just Thierry Cavarola, who has forced the pace all day long, pulled along by the very thought he was a Frenchman riding just down the road from where he lives. And Konyshev was a surprise, he was going with him. But then came Stephen Rooks up from the main field, and in just 2 kilometres on the climb, he closed 30 seconds on the leaders. He hadn't caught them yet, but it wouldn't be long now. To the cheers of the crowd, at last a face many people recognised. King of the Mountains in this year's Tour de France, and second overall in that race a year ago. The Dutchman was on the attack. Further behind, the pack had shrunk from the original 190 starters to a mere handful, but still the famous names were there. Sean Kelly, Laurent Fignon, Greg LeMond had still to make the move. With just 2 climbs of the Côte de Montagnole to go, Cavarola was still inspired, and the persistent Russian from Gorky was just behind him. But now the field were in full flight. Sean Kelly was in the leading group, so too was Martinelli. But look at this. Stephen Rooks, the Dutchman, on the descent of the Côte de Montagnole. With just over 10 miles to go to the finish, Stephen Rooks had joined the front too. And as the riders came through to begin their final lap, with the rain still coming down, the 3 leaders were in sight now of all of the chasers. The big names were coming back into the race. The big names could still win the world title. And among them, Laurent Fignon, Sean Kelly, Steve Bauer, La Haretta from Spain, Claude Coquillon from Belgium, and Greg LeMond. We'll be back.
We're into the final 8 miles of this 163-mile race. Greg LeMond, Laurent Fignon, Sean Kelly, and the other favorites now have their hopes of winning the World Championship title very definitely alive.
So at long last, the favourites have made their move. They can see the 3 leaders now, and Greg LeMond is driving this group along. The American rider who's won the Tour de France, he's in again in a chasing group. There he is at the front on the far left. And he knows now too his greatest rival, Laurent Fignon, number 88, is right up behind him.
It's interesting, too, that the protagonists of last year's World Championships are also side by side. Steve Bauer and, of course, Claude Coquillon, the subject of controversy 1 year ago.
It looked as though Fignon there said something to Sean Kelly he didn't like, and I think it was go to the front, and Kelly told him in broad Irish exactly what he thought of that.
It's La Haretta of Spain who's having an excellent year, and his country well represented by this young man.
La Haretta setting the pace at the front at the moment. He's ridden the Tour of Italy, Tour of Spain, and the Tour de France this year. What a great season he's had, finishing 5th in the Tour de France.
The lead was almost 3 minutes, Phil, and it went down to 40 seconds almost immediately. But since then, it's really hovered at that point. And I think the breakaway still feels secure, still feels possible that they can win, even though the distance is so small. So is the distance to the finish line.
Well, we're seeing here, Brian, the gap up to the leaders as our helicopter camera takes us further along the road. It's still a considerable gap, as you say. There they are. And they're being led by Stephen Rooks, who did a terrific ride to cross this gap. He came across on his own. He's really added the power now to the engine here. Thierry Claverola, for my money, has been the star of this championship in second place, but now surely he's getting tired. He's been out in front for 95 miles.
He shared the spotlight, however, with Konyshev, the elegant Soviet rider, just disappearing off to the left. Claverola is certainly the sentimental favorite here, not only for the French crowd, but for everyone who has watched this race. I would agree with you. He really has been the star.
A tall figure, Stephen Rooks, trying to keep this gap alive as he changes down the gears. At least the climbs have suited him, and still he wants some help from Claverola. But he must now see, Brian, looking over his shoulder there, this group with Martinelli and Sean Kelly, the two boys in green, Steve Bauer here in the blue jersey to our left, and Greg LeMond driving the group at the front.
Also in the middle of that group is Gianni Bugno, a man who many of the riders feared in this race, especially on the hills. Back again to the breakaway now. Konyshev on the right, Rooks on the left, and Claverola, the Frenchman. Here's Greg LeMond powering that breakaway alongside his friend, Steve Bauer.
These riders are absolutely soaked. This has been an horrendous day for them. The rain has been torrential. The course has been the most severe since Solange in 1980, and that, of course, is just a few miles down the road.
Gianni Bugno and Sean Kelly and the others in the field, even they are looking behind themselves nervously. Only recently have they left the remainder of the big field.
It's rather ironic, Brian, to think that Claude Coquillon on the far right and on the left of the picture there, Steve Bauer, are back in the final showdown again, because last year, of course, we had that big controversial finish. These are the three leaders, and quite clearly, they are losing their impetus. Stephen Rooks is doing most of the work. Konyshev is looking back, and it seems to me that Konyshev is the crafty one of this breakaway. He might still be conserving something for the finish.
I think the chase group now really senses the kill, and the body language of the breakaway tells us that, yes, indeed, they feel like they are beaten at this point. So now, if anything, the pace in this chase is starting to pick up. Bauer at the front, and Fignon sitting in second spot.
This is the last chance for these now. This is the springboard, the final climb of the hill. If they don't go here, they can wave goodbye to the three medals because they're up the road. You've got Sean Kelly. You have at the back now Greg LeMond. On the far right in blue is Bugno. And Martinelli to our far right at the back of that group. There they are, making their way up towards the Côte de Montagnole for the 21st and final time. And they're all that is left, and all who can affect this world title now from the 190 who set out.
Still a lot of nervous looking around, even among these 9 riders. They sense that the chase is going to be successful, but they're looking to each other to make the final little bit of the chase. And here now, Rooks leads the 3 up the hill. Thierry Claverola, his hopes of winning still must be alive. I think of the 3, he's the only one being driven now, perhaps, by the crowd alone.
Konyshev has refused to do any of the pacemaking for the last couple of miles. The 23-year-old Soviet man from Gorky. This is the first year we've seen the Soviets as professional riders. They've taken a little while to settle into the scene, but now it looks as though Konyshev is beginning to impress. And there's an attack here. Laurent Fignon has accelerated from the front of the pack, and for the moment they're fighting to grab him, but that's Fignon, and this is the time to do it.
He's made a very excellent move here on the final climb and has really opened a significant gap on the rest of the field. He's apparently caught the others sleeping, or certainly timed a move that he feels like is going to succeed all the way to the end.
Well, anybody who wants to win now has got to counter the move by Laurent Fignon, a man driven by the disappointment of losing the Tour de France this year to Greg LeMond. What finer place to make up for it than the World Championship in France, and the crowd are going to shout him all the way up this climb now. The 3 riders are only just in front.
You can see the determination on his face, and if anyone is not familiar with the drive that this man has, you can certainly see it right here.
He's a great competitor, Brian. We saw the way he took the yellow jersey in the Pyrenees in the Tour de France. He lost it back to Greg LeMond. He took it back again and then lost it in the end. A look over his shoulder there to see what the progress is like. And he's coming towards the top of the Côte de Montagnole for the final time. And just around the corner ahead of him are the 3 leaders in the world title.
It's amazing how steep this climb is and how effortless these riders seem to be able to go up it. when they are determined, as Fignon is right here. He makes another corner, many switchbacks on this climb, and he is a man possessed by a vision of rainbow jersey that he could win as a world champion.
Well, there's the chasing group, and they're losing ground on Fignon. And Fignon will know it now. He's gambled everything on this attack. So it looks as though Laurent Fignon is heading towards victory in the World Championship.
Can it be possible that he will exact his revenge from the humiliation of the Tour de France? It certainly seems so. Stay with us. We'll be back. The original three breakaway riders, not willing to give up the race, still hoping to survive and win. Brooks, Lavriola, and Konyshev, with Laurent Fignon in hot pursuit.
So there's just 4 miles remaining now of the 163, and Greg LeMond has made his move. Look at this. Greg LeMond has flown across the gap from the chasing group. He's caught Laurent Fignon, and he's making it look so easy. Fignon glances over his shoulder there, but I don't think he'll know yet that Greg LeMond has joined him. That is a fine piece of riding by the American. Now he knows, because he's looked through to his inside, and LeMond attacks him. And Fignon is finding somewhere the reserves to go and catch up with LeMond.
Laurent Fignon's worst nightmare has come back to life. Greg LeMond surging on the hill in the final stage of the Tour de France. These two fought some 3 minutes apart. Here they're side by side on the final climb.
And look at this, LeMond goes again. LeMond goes again, and this time he has the three leaders in sight. So for the first time in the best part of 3.5 hours, the men at the head of the World Championship can be seen. And it's the American Greg LeMond who races to get across to them first. He's dragging with him Laurent Fignon, and Fignon's in trouble. Fignon has lost the gap just like he did in the Tour de France. LeMond is going away from him. So Laurent Fignon, but the top of the hill is coming, Brian, and Fignon can come back yet.
Here comes LeMond right around the trio. And look at Lavriola. The fight in him is not yet gone. As LeMond comes by, it is the Frenchman that goes to his wheel as they begin now the descent.
So we have LeMond leading from Claverola, Konyshev and Stephen Rooks. Fignon is just off the back. This is Steve Bauer here, also trying to cross the gap. And look at this, Steve Bauer has a flat back tyre. I'm certain, Brian, that Steve Bauer had a flat back tyre there as he was coming down this descent.
He is certainly, yes it is. Look, the flat rear tire, he's signaling, but it's far too late to change a wheel and get back in. A man that probably has the most incredible bad luck when he's so close to victory or a chance at it here in the World Championship again.
I can't believe that, Brian. Last year disqualified from the World Championship. Now he's out at the most crucial moment with a flat. He won't believe it either. But this is now developing into one of the finest finishes for years. And this is the group behind, and they look as though they're beaten. Robert Miller is there in the white jersey, number 3 in line. These are the stragglers now on what has been a day of attrition in this rain. Most of them have given up, and we hear that less than 50 are still riding around the course. Still the crowd cheer up the remnants of this World Championship, and this bunch here do not know what is happening at the front and what a dramatic end we're in for.
The final 2 miles of the race course, and on the descent now, it is very difficult for attacks to happen and gaps to be closed. There's Laurent Fignon, though. He has rejoined and, in fact, gone away from the small group that he was with. And Greg LeMond is the one that's making the chase right now.
But Brian, I can't believe this. This World Championship is coming down between the two same men who dominated the Tour de France, and it's Fignon just ahead now of Greg LeMond, and the other three trying to match the pace. We're on the descent now, down towards the finish in Chambéry.
They've certainly thrown caution to the wind, even on this wet road. No tiptoeing around the corners for this group, not with a World Championship at stake. 90 kilometers an hour, nearly 60 miles an hour for the breakaway group. And Fignon has been caught by LeMond. There are 5 riders together now. Rooks in the back, 2 Frenchmen, the Soviet and American Greg LeMond.
Well, the odds now surely are on the side of the French with 2 riders here. But Konyshev is the man pushing the pace, and this really is a fine piece of riding by him. He's been out amongst the leaders all day, and he still will not give up. We saw him waiting when the 3 were about to be caught, and now it seems he was keeping something back for the sprint.
With less than 2 miles to go, this race is far from over. Stay with us.
And we're now back in the last 2 miles of this year's title race, and Konyshev of the Soviet Union leading the race down the mountain towards the finish in Chambéry. And he's being chased here by Claverola, and these are the remnants. We just got a glimpse there of the 3 riders who are chasing them, and it includes Greg LeMond. Through the chicane, The road's now extremely wet and slippery.
It appears as though Claviola and Konyshev, two of the original heroes, are now back at the front. But they look a little slow, and even Konyshev now is looking back at the other three. And here's Greg LeMond in full cry. He's caught them again.
Well, LeMond was asking for somebody to come and help with the chase there, and Laurent Fignon, thinking of his teammates, Claviola, would not take up the pace.
Even a hand gesture by LeMond there, a little bit frustrated, but he's nevertheless closed the gap to the leaders, and we're back together with 5. And here's Kelly now. Sean Kelly has come up from the group behind and joined the front group as well.
So the great veteran of the World Championship, Sean Kelly, who's won a silver medal as far back as 1982 in England, is now back in this race. He's prepared for it, he wants to win it, and surely at 33 now, the man in green, this has got to be his last shot.
He's certainly one of the most dangerous sprinters in the group. And here goes Laurent Fignon, not wanting to wait for a sprint against Sean Kelly or Greg LeMond or any of the others. Laurent Fignon, again, very animated here as we come down to just the final mile and a half or so of this race.
6 riders remaining, Claviola dangling off the back. Perhaps at last the man from France is feeling the pressure. Fignon has eased, LeMond has marked him, and somebody's gone, and it looks to me as though Rooks has gone. Rooks has put in another attack, he's opened the gap. Now can they react? Fignon is tired after that attack.
And Greg LeMond, having just caught Fignon, also tired. Those two are watching each other, and here goes Rooks, taking advantage of the hesitation, and once again it's LeMond that takes up the chase.
Where does Greg LeMond find his energy from? This man will not give up this year. The winner of the Tour de France is now chasing down Stephen Rooks. Tremendous attack going on here by Greg LeMond. He could still win this World Championship if he can catch up with Stephen Rooks. In the World Championship press room, a few hundred feet from the maddening crowd at the finishing line, reporters from a dozen European nations have already begun filing their stories, even before the result is known. Others have chosen the press room as a quiet haven, or perhaps to call a curious editor in Paris. At the television grandstand, which is of Olympic proportions, the tension has mounted. And for Bob LeMond, Greg's father, and Fred Mengoni, Greg's mentor, the pictures tell it all. Greg is still in contention. Otto Giacom, Greg's faithful trainer, is also tense. He's not alone.
Greg LeMond has caught and passed Stephen Rooks and Sean Kelly. The feared sprinter is right on his wheel. Rooks tries to tack on to those two. They look over their shoulders, and just in the upper right corner of the screen come the rest of the players, led by Laurent Fignon.
Well, we're approaching the final half mile of this world title. There are 6 riders here who could now take it away with them. And here we come, the red kite up there says 1 kilometre from the finish. Laurent Fignon on the far right is Konyshev. The green jersey is Kelly, but the attack goes. Laurent Fignon has gone. LeMond has countered the move. Kelly looks to me, Brian, as though he's struggling.
Well, Laurent Fignon has decided to take matters into his own hands here in the final kilometer of the race course. Less than half a mile to go now. LeMond is on his wheel, and Fignon making his bid for victory. Kelly's got the good position behind LeMond for Rooks and Claviola and the Soviet Konyshev in the rest of the spots behind them. Now Fignon gives it up a little bit, and even LeMond is looking around nervously, and so is Kelly.
This is a tense finish. There's so many riders here know now they are a spit away from a world title, and nobody willing to open the chase, because the man that does will lose the title. That's what they're thinking. Konyshev on the far left, a Russian rider in a professional world title for the first time in the history of the sport. He would love the title today. Laurent Fignon being marked all the time by Greg LeMond. They'll see the finish now, and this is the sprint starting.
Fignon breaks on the right, and Greg LeMond on the left. LeMond in the lead, going to the straightaway line. Sean Kelly on his wheel in second spot. LeMond still in the lead, coming down the straightaway. Kelly makes a break on the left side. And on the right, it's Konyshev, the Soviet. Greg LeMond leading, his hand in the air. He's got it, the World Championship title to Greg LeMond.
Allez, allez, allez. Non, c'est son père. C'est son père. Énormément de monde, évidemment. Non. Je suis avec lui. Écartez les gars. Allez. Quand tu vas arriver, je crois abandonner. Voilà. Le chef d'État est livré. C'est son père, nom de Dieu. C'est son père. Ça va pas. C'est son père. Ça va. C'est un barbare quand même.
Far from the frenzy of Greg LeMond's victory, Sean Kelly's bronze medal, perhaps his last chance at a world title, has slipped away.
But the madness continues for the new world champion, Greg LeMond of the United States. What a year it's been for this young man. From being on a deathbed to champion of the world and the winner of the Tour de France.
And now if he can only survive the crush of the press and the crush of the fans to get to the podium and collect his medal. 2 laps to go, the whole race changed, and you were a very big part of that.
Well, with 2 laps to go, I really didn't think I was even going to finish the race. It was only until a lap and a half, 2 laps to go that I started feeling good. Really only a last lap, and I felt very, very good.
And so the sad figure of Laurent Fignon almost going the wrong way. What a year it's been for him, beaten again by the American.
All that's left now for Greg LeMond is to collect the laurels of his victory. He already has the rainbow jersey that he wore once before, and now the gold medal. Greg LeMond, for the second time in 1989, stands atop the cycling world.
I broke my wheel with 2 laps to go, and I was going to change it, and I decided, I better not change it. And at that moment, I started feeling good.
Another chapter in the fairy tale. How do you feel?
Well, considering I thought about winning today. I mean, I imagined what it would be like winning, and but I didn't think it was really. I mean, I thought it was possible, but I thought it'd be very, very difficult. And then when I got in the race, I felt so bad, and I was ready to quit. And I just kept putting it, saying one more time, and it worked out. Everything seems to be working out right now.
Things certainly are working out. Greg LeMond is world champion. The silver medal goes to Dimitri Konyshev, bronze to Sean Kelly, and for Fignon, a disappointing 6th. And so another chapter in the continuing story of Greg LeMond comes to a close. It's a story that was destined to be something quite extraordinary right from the beginning. But of course, just because his story has been exceptional hardly means it's anything like the fairy tale many would like it to be. Imagine the disappointment of winning the 1986 Tour de France and not being able to enjoy it. Or the injustice of being gunned down at the prime of an athletic career so brilliant it's unlikely to be equaled in the foreseeable future. Of course, life's dark moments have a way of being easily swept aside when fortune takes a turn for the better. And now that Greg LeMond is riding high again, and praised so highly by those who reviled him only months ago, let us not forget that perhaps most remarkable about this man is that he never lost the ability to believe in himself through the darkest times. For Phil Liggett, I'm Brian Drebber. Thank you for joining us at the 1989 World Cycling Championships.